What's up, guys, and welcome to the Rebalance podcast, where we dive into topics that matter most when it comes to overcoming struggles, injuries, and finding balance in your life. Everybody's idea of balance is that bit different, so my goal is to give you different perspectives, practical tips, as well as expert insights into what it means to live a balanced life. My name is Robbie Cassidy. I'm a physiotherapist and a health coach, and I've been helping people reignite their love for challenge, overcome their fear, and find more balance in their life through the process of self-development. So, let's get into it. Eoin, how are you getting on?
Robbie, I am very good, bro. How are you? Good to be back. Fifth time lucky.
Number 5 is right, yeah. And every one of them solid. So I wanted to, thank you first for coming back on and jumping on. I know we were chatting over the weekend. We said it would be wrong to not do one this year and coming to the end of the year. So at least we'll be able to talk through things. I think one of the main topics that we can go over is looking back on the year, a small bit reflection on it, and then looking forward to goals for the year ahead, I guess. First off, for those who don't know you, or for maybe people who are listening for the first time, do you want to give them a quick rundown of who you are and what you do?
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, and I think that it's a great time of year to go into the topics that you discussed. So excited to do that. I am an online coach. I've been an online coach for 4 years now, going on 5 years. Been predominantly helping people with body composition by helping them to improve their energy, their sleep, their performance in the gym. Generally working with people between about 25 to 35. I am super interested in entrepreneurship and extreme sports and training hard and all those kind of things. So my clients tend to be those type of people as well, or people who are interested in those things. And yeah, I won't give too much more other than myself and yourself are here for the 5th time. We are the best of friends outside of what we do in podcasts, and it's always great to sync up and do it again. And we did leave it a little bit late. We almost did 2023 without a podcast, so it's good that we're here.
Yeah, it is. And on opposite ends of the world completely at the moment as well. I'm obviously in Brazil, yourself set up in Bulgaria at the moment. What brings you out there?
So there's quite a few things, some of which we've spoken about. One is definitely the extreme sports side of things, which is skiing and snowboarding, although it's not actually that season yet. It's generally January to April is snow season. So that is going to be exciting. But they also have skydiving and wingsuiting and all the other kind of cool stuff that I'm into out here. And there's various other reasons, but it's quite a good place to live. And it kind of ticks all the boxes for me in terms of just having a good place to build a business from, good places to train, good places to eat, good quality of life. People are cool. And yeah, just really ticks a lot of boxes for me right now. I also like the fact that they have seasons. So they've got snow season, but they've also got, in summertime it gets to like 35 degrees. It's also super well connected. It's halfway between Europe and Dubai. There's a lot of flights pretty much to everywhere. And I also like the east of Europe. I lived in Croatia before and I really, really like the east. And there's something about it. It's quite cool.
Yeah, nice. It's definitely a new one for me. Not one that I have ventured into too much. I think that I would have been to Prague is probably as far east as I've gone. But as we were talking, I might try and make my way over there in the summertime. But come here, let's jump into it. So it's at the end of the year. Oh, sorry. It's at the end of the year. We're looking back over the year and kind of things that have gone by and looking at the year ahead and looking at what we want to plan and what we want to work on. So I guess let's dive straight into that side of things. When we look at, I guess, first off, when you're looking back at the year itself, what are some of the main, in terms of health specifically, what are some of the main things that you've learned or some of the main gains that you've made over the year?
It's a good question. It's an interesting question. I think my biggest takeaway this year has been how big of an effect sleep has on everything else. And I knew this. It wasn't something that I learned this year. I've been very, very aware of this previously. But this year I've really been burning the candle at both ends. I've really been pushing myself physically in the gym, mentally with, the things that I'm taking on in work and outside of work and other projects that I'm working on. Also trying to maintain lots of healthy relationships with friends and personal relationships and family. So I've really been pushing it on all fronts. And I've still been going out and socializing and eating out and obviously doing the extreme sports and stuff as well. And for me, this year has been a constant battle to not be sleep deprived. And it's been a constant battle to sleep as well as possible and as efficiently as possible while running 16, 17 hour days every single day of the week. And that's not an overstatement. I pretty much run a 16, 17 hour day every single day between training and work and meeting people. I pretty much never stop. And for me, that has been the big takeaway. And I've also noticed how easy it is to let a lack of sleep have a negative knock-on effect to everything else, and then vice versa. Having good quality sleep, a good routine, knock on positively to everything else. So I think that's probably my biggest takeaway, and probably the thing that just for myself personally, I could make the most progress on and would have the biggest impact on the rest of my life if even I got an extra hour. My sleep on average is 7 hours a night. It's bang on 7 hours a night on average. And I function, I like to think, at a pretty high level. But if I had an extra hour, I feel I could get an awful lot more out of that hour. So that is my one of my takeaways. Definitely the main one on the health and fitness front. What about yourself? What have you run into this year?
Yeah, that's a great one, man, with the sleep, because it's something that I noticed myself is that when you have a bad night's sleep, now there's actually research showing that your perspective on the sleep that you've had determines how rested you feel the next day, which is I thought was very interesting to see. But I've noticed that when my sleep is off, that one little thing that goes wrong in the morning, let's say, can oftentimes build, and you get this snowball effect and you get this negative feedback throughout the day. A lot of times when you're underslept as well, from my experience, or what I've noticed in myself, is that I'm a lot more inclined to do things that I'm not really gaining anything from, but it's more for short-term advantage. Obviously, you have all the basic ones like eating sugary foods and stuff like that. But for me, I also find that I go on Instagram, TikTok, and I'm scrolling and I'm kind of mindlessly working through that. That's a huge one I find, and I've noticed it a lot more, how much of an impact sleep has on my emotional state, as well as my ability to control and my willpower as well. I think one of the biggest takeaways this year from, I don't know, would you put it from a health perspective or would you put it from a psychological perspective, or just a learning in general, was I think the benefits of solitude, the benefits of spending time alone and working on a project. That's something that I've really focused on this year, and building out this back program that I've been building for the last, God, it's probably 14 months now. I've noticed that as you really sit down now, obviously we can look at this in so many ways. You can look at this in sports and life in whatever way, but the more you sit down and focus on the same task over and over and over again, it's like you unlock these little new levels to understanding a task. But the only way you can do that is through solitude, I feel, in a lot of ways. So when you spend time alone and you start to understand it, you're reading all around it, you're kind of you're learning about it, you're trying to kind of broaden your horizon on the different elements that could be contributing to it. I'm talking specifically now with back pain. When you start to look at it in detail, you notice how other things are connected. And I think the more I leaned into it and the more I read about it, the more I learned about it, it actually kind of came back to that idea as well as what you were talking about with sleep, the way little things can actually set it off and get this kind of momentum going, or the snowball. So I guess one for me was solitude. And I guess it's that snowball effect as well. The other thing I know we talked about at the weekend is pulling the slingshot back, where it's like delaying gratification for stuff. That's another big one. It's like, how long can you delay gratification before you start to look for payoffs? And it's something that I've tried to incorporate into my own life, into the course, into all my clients' lives as well, where we have your little things that you celebrate throughout the week. But at the same time, you have the bigger goal in mind. That's 6 months, 12 months, 2 years down the line. That's something that I've really learned. I know that's a couple of different things, but it's solitude, which I guess leaned into the levels, which leaned into the things that you can really understand how different aspects of your life and your environment affect you. They were, I guess, some of the main ones. And then outside of that, then obviously what we were talking about with sleep and everything else around it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, loads of things. I agree with you there. So one of them was when you mentioned that your perception of how well you slept actually has a knock-on effect to how you feel. And so I have this ring. I'm not I'm not a
Nice.
shill for Aura Ring. They're not sponsoring the podcast just yet, but maybe they will someday. But the Aura Ring is a great tracker. And I have purposely tried, I say tried because I often compulsively check it, but I try not to check my sleep data until later in the day because of that very reason, where if I check it early in the day, I will I'll almost start feeling whatever the ring is telling me. So if the sleep score is saying that I'm under recovered, that my HRV is lower than normal, that my heart rate is higher than normal, and basically that my body is in a state of being under recovered, overtrained, if I see that in the morning after I wake up, I'll actually feel like that throughout the day, even though the only thing that has actually changed is my perception of the quality of the rest versus the actual quality of the rest itself. So definitely agree with you on that point. And I think on all the other points as well, the slingshot point, like for me, looking at things on a 10-year lens, which for some people sounds absolutely crazy, but I think if you want to be consistent with anything, particularly when it comes to business or health, you really need to take a longer term view, particularly in business, to be able to ride the ups and the downs. Because there's a lot of short term ups and downs, and I think that's just life as well. But definitely having that longer term view, delaying gratification, and allowing all of your work to compound over time for the payoff that you get at the end, whether that is a payoff in terms of health or in terms of wealth or in terms of something else that you're working on. I definitely think that that's massively important. And I think for me as well, this year is probably the year that I have started to look at things on a longer term time frame. So totally resonate with everything that you said there as well. And I think solitude is one I struggle with, maybe. I definitely don't make time to be on my own. My life is very full, and any spare time I have, I generally try and fill it with people because I like hanging out with people and I like meeting new people and that kind of stuff as well. So solitude is definitely one I kind of struggle with, but as well, you mentioned it where if you are underslept, you're not feeling 100% and you find yourself in solitude, it can end up being very non-productive. It can be scrolling Instagram, it can be just, not using the time productively or effectively. And I think for me, Instagram is definitely a big drag on my energy and it's a big drag on my focus and my attention. And I struggle to go any length of time without checking or being on Instagram. But I think on this, my kind of smaller version of solitude has been starting my day with a 4 hour deep work block. So getting up a couple of hours before everybody else, not touching the phone, and from say 7 a.m. until 11 a.m., which is not even that early. It's pretty standard for a lot of people. But from 7 a.m. until 11 a.m., having complete solitude without distractions to work on something. And if I did that 5 days a week, which not every week I get done, but some weeks I do, that just really moves the needle on whatever it is that I'm working on. And I think that's similar to what you were mentioning about when you're building out this program, you're getting very into it and you're not distracted by other things. You can really use that as much more productive time and you can really get into the task and understand it better.
Yeah, that's something as well. I should say that I've leaned into a bit more this year is kind of taking that time in the morning. I probably take 2 hours. Then I look at I try to squeeze in a bit of deep work here and there, but I haven't been as consistent as that with the last while. Anyone who doesn't know what that is, the deep work by Cal Newport, he talks about it in a good bit of detail. What I'm talking about specifically now, or maybe talking about something I can imagine it's along the same lines, where you're just taking time out your day, you're setting time aside to have no distractions about anything around you, no music or anything in a lot of cases for some people. And you just take that time to get your brain into a state that it's getting stuff done, it's getting work done. And it really does have a huge effect on your productivity going like after that fact. But for me, I think in the morning, I've been pretty good now. Obviously, since I moved about 2 weeks ago. I've noticed that things have changed slightly in that I'm trying to figure out my routine at the moment. This is a very Instagrammable thing, but I've been very consistent with getting a meditation in the morning. I've been really consistent with just a simple 12-minute, 14-minute meditation. And really, I think that that's one of the main things that has driven me to be able to to be able to work on a project for so much longer, because I have a very, very, very strict rule that I never check my phone before 9 o'clock. I can't check my phone before 9 o'clock because if I do, I find it throws me off for the day. So I try to leave that down to the side. Unless there's something like somebody has a message that I need to check, or if there's something that's urgent, I'll see it flash up on the screen. But rarely do I go in and use social media or text people before 9 o'clock in the morning. And I find that that's a great way of setting me up for the day, because I think that it just gets you into this state of being ready to be more productive. Like you're priming yourself to be more productive. And that in itself then has made me realize that if I can continue to set time aside, and looking at that, like where you set that hour or 2 hours in the morning aside, that it makes first off, it makes my day so much better, but I can kind of block different sections of my day off then. For now, it's like, okay, from 7 to 9, I'm going to spend this time, make my coffee, get up, get out and get some sunlight, do a bit of meditation. I might do reading. I've been trying to learn Portuguese recently, so I take the time to do that. But then afterwards, I know, okay, well, from 7 to 9, I'm going to go to the gym. And then between that time so let's say before 7, I might do a little bit of prep for food for the day or for dinner for tonight. So I can fit that in. Okay, after lunch, I might fit in 30 minutes. I do a bit of food prep for dinner at nighttime. And just that idea of blocking off time segments to get things done is so much easier than thinking I have to get these things done today. When am I going to get them in? But instead of that, for me, I found that just saying, okay, 7 to 9, I know what I'm doing every morning. So I know when I get up exactly what one thing goes into the next. And then I can look at planning my day a small bit more. And the same thing in the evening time. And I think that works so well for people who are trying to build a habit and trying to get into things, is set that time, like set that block. And once you have a bit of a compass and you know what you're trying to work towards, I know we talk about goals a lot, but for me, I think it's even more important to you have your goals and the titles and the stuff that you want to get to, but having a compass of I'm moving in this direction and I'm spending this time of the day to get me towards that direction, or to push me another step forward in that direction, I think is so beneficial. I don't know if that resonates with you, or what you would think of that.
Yeah, it totally resonates 100%. But question for you on it. Are you using Google Calendar, or what are you using to plan out your day? Or is it just something that you like write out manually the night before?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, I think what I do is I know in the morning, I don't use Google Calendar or anything like that, because I found in the past when I did use it, I wasn't as consistent with it. But now I kind of have times. I have my times blocked for calls. When I was in Argentina, it was like I had jiu-jitsu from 1 to 3, so I couldn't take calls from 1 to 3 in the day. Now, obviously, since I injured my knee, I haven't had that chance. It's more that I know the general times, like 7 to 9, I do this. I need to get more consistent at it and better at it for sure. But it's more that I have an idea at what my day is structured like, because every day is pretty much the same, or similar, let's say. And then obviously I get to the beach and stuff like that and go out and have social events at the same time. I'm not a complete hermit. What about yourself? How do you structure it better?
That's what a complete hermit would say. I use Google Calendar simply because it's the only thing that I can effectively use to track my entire life, basically. Like all of my calls will show up on Google Calendar, and they're automatically, if a client books in a call, for example, or if a new prospect who wants to become a client books a call, that will pop into my calendar and I'll see it there. So it gives me a kind of rundown of everything. And then I've got various different calls throughout the week, as part of mentorships and other things that I'm working on. So they're all in the calendar, and it's kind of like the only place where I can centralize everything and I can check my whole week. But again, like you said, block off that time for the gym, block off that time for yourself, block off whatever time it is that you need. And there's a great story. I'm going to completely steal this from Kieran at Total Mental Performance. I think he stole it from somebody else anyway. I don't think it's his story, but he always talks about this story, right, where there's two lumberjacks, and I may butcher the intricacies of it, but I'll give it a go. One young, jacked, think of, young, jacked in the gym, super fit, super strong, lumberjack, and one old guy in his 70s, weathered, been around the block, doesn't have the physical capabilities of the younger guy, and they're in this competition to chop down as many trees as they possibly can. And the bell goes off to start the competition, and the competition runs, they have a full day. 12-hour day or whatever to cut down as many trees as possible. And they tear off with the axes. Bang, bang, bang. Actually, I think the young guy tears off with the axe first. Bang, 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 knocking down trees. And before the old guy stops, he takes off and drinks a cup of coffee and chills out. And he comes along and he knocks down a few trees. And the younger guy is whack, whack, whacking trees down, and he can hear the other lumberjack in the distance. So he can hear how many swings your man is making. And every now and then, the young guy will hear that the old guy has stopped for a break. And as they're going through the trees, the young guy's thinking, I've got him. I've got him. He's like, this fella's, he's taking a break every 20 minutes. He's heading off for coffee. I haven't stopped chopping all day. He said, I've definitely got him. Anyway, at the end of the day, they get to the judge's podium or whatever you do in a lumberjack competition. And the old guy has beaten him by a long shot. And the young guy can't understand how the old guy has beaten him. And he said, but I heard you. I swang the axe more than you. I did more work overall. I didn't stop. You kept stopping. You didn't have as many swings as me. I could hear them. I could hear that, the number you had were far fewer than mine. How did you cut down more trees than me? And the old guy said, well, every time I stopped, he said I was going to sharpen the saw. And the whole thing is that, like, you need to back off and sharpen your tools to perform at a high level. And you need to have your own downtime to perform at a high level. And you can't just push, push, push all the time. Well, you can actually, but you won't be as effective. So that's what's really, really important for everybody. It doesn't really matter what you want to do. If you want to feel better in your life and you want to feel good in your life and you want to be successful in whatever it is that you endeavor to feel like successful in, you need to have time to sharpen the saw, essentially, or sharpen the axe in this case. But that was a kind of cool story that just popped to mind, and Kieran has drilled that into me. So thank you, Kieran, if you're listening to this, and I'm happy to steal it and pass on your knowledge. But yeah, man, I think it's super, super important to have that downtime. And I think just giving yourself some structure. We're creatures of habit, like people are like, I don't have a routine, but it's like, we all have routines. Some of them are just shit. Some of them are just terrible routines, but we all have some routine. We all have something we do in the morning and the evening. And it's just about making that more in line with what we actually want to achieve.
Yeah, that's a great story, man. Actually, I'm going to definitely take that one now myself. But when you look at it, what are your ways of sharpening the saw then? What are specific ways that obviously, let's say sleep is there. That's a nice one. But what other factors or what other habits do you have that help you to sharpen the straw? So
for sure, like, I think this is really individual as well. And so one thing that I learned earlier this year was I just constantly push myself to burnout. And I'm actually really good at it, which is, it's kind of a double-edged sword because I can really, really push on all fronts. And I can get to 98% burnout, and I can just ride the wave for ages and ages and ages, and eventually crash and need 3 days of doing absolutely nothing. And I figured out that I was working with coaches earlier this year, and we looked at my schedule and the stuff that I was doing. We're like, all the stuff you're doing, none of the stuff you're doing is actually restorative. It's not chill stuff. It's yeah, in your downtime, you're jumping out of airplanes. And you're running on your rest days, you're training on your rest days. It's you're just constantly pushing. And I love that. But at the same time, they were you need to actually have some more chill time where you're actually not just pushing your body all the time. Because even on the weekends, I would go for a hike or I'd go and meet somebody and we go and have a day out and we do a lot of walking or whatever. And it's that is all amazing stuff. And it's stuff that I tell my clients to do and I love doing myself. But sometimes you need to pull back even a little bit more. So I'm still figuring it out. It's really dependent. I think for me, I get energized by spending time with people. I'm quite extroverted. So in that sense, I like spending my time with people. Obviously I do that online, but it's different when it's not work related. So that's one way I sharpen the saw. Gym is kind of twofold because I really obliterate myself in the gym and push myself. But if I recover well and sleep well after it, it's sharpening the saw. But if I don't recover well, I don't eat well and sleep well, then that's just adding more fatigue to my nervous system. So it can kind of be different things. Some of my clients love to just take an actual day to chill out, get a few steps in, watch Netflix. That's not really my vibe. I don't do that personally, but I'll read a book. I definitely listen to way too many podcasts,
Yeah.
way too many podcasts. That's actually, podcasts are probably holding me back from so much progression in so many areas of life. But I think, yeah, I think it's very individual. I think for me, like the most important things are emotional connection with friends and family. And, actually, funnily enough, how often have we called each other this year from the opposite side of the room or the opposite side of the world? And I remember one day in, I don't know, May or June, I called you in the afternoon or you called me in the afternoon and we hung out online for like 5 hours on a phone
Yeah.
call. And we were just, both going about our day, eating our food and just catching up. And like that really energizes me as well, because obviously it's hard to keep in contact with people across the globe. I think we do a very good job of it because we really make the time always to check in with each other. But that kind of stuff, that's for me what really sharpens the saw.
Yeah.
And obviously, like learning new skills. I've started getting into going to the shooting range here, which I just think is a lot of fun.
Nice.
Like typical boys will be boys, bang bang and loud guns and you know, call me what you want. Maybe I'm an idiot, but it's a lot of fun and I really enjoy it. So
It's good.
things
Yeah.
like that, just learning new skills and meeting new people, and obviously a few drinks here and there. But again, that can be a double-edged sword because it can help you to wind down and it can be fun and social, but it also can add systemic fatigue. So
Yes.
it's a
Yes.
balancing act, man. I think it's a balancing act.
As with everything, man, as with everything, I think as well, it brings me to the idea of when you look at that idea of sharpening the saw. I often talk to people I'm working with, and I take this on myself as well when I'm looking at it. When you look at fatigue and how much of an effect it has on you, I think people need to start breaking it down into different levels of fatigue, because you have physical fatigue. Obviously, you have fatigue as a whole. How's the body feeling? How's the nervous system? Like, what's your energy like? You have that as a whole. But you can have emotional fatigue. You can have psychological fatigue. You can have physical fatigue and spiritual fatigue, obviously, as well. So I think that when we start to take a step back and you look at them and you isolate them, and this is something that I really, really focus on with clients, especially ones who can't figure out their triggers for what an issue is. And it's in the course as well, is that when you're trying to isolate and say, what is the main trigger for the issue or the flare up that I have right now? You often have to look back at the days and the weeks before that has occurred. And when you look at it that way, you can say, okay, was I overtraining? What was my training schedule like? And what's my training schedule been like for the last couple of weeks? That's a pretty simple one to pick out. Have I been training too much and not recovering well? And oftentimes what you'll get with that is sleep will have a huge effect on it, because their recovery or their diet might be off or their hydration might be down. But when you look at the things that are more like emotional fatigue or even that spiritual side of things, spiritual is a small bit more difficult because it's described in different ways. Often when you say spiritual, people think of like the church and religion and that. But I think more of when we look at spiritual, I think you need to focus in on more of the connectedness to those around you, to nature, to your life, to your purpose. But to not get into that side of it too much, then you have the psychological side of things. But a really interesting one that I've noticed with a lot of people is when they have work or when they're at work and things are getting busy, that emotional fatigue kind of creeps in that you start to notice that you become a little more agitated, and it may be that you become a bit more anxious. And I think we can all relate to this, where you're 100% and you're friends with everyone around you or you're friends with everyone at work. And then you start to notice that there's someone is just getting to you and pissing you off a little bit more. Like it's your patience is starting to drop off. That's a huge one. Irritability, becoming a bit more nervous, becoming a bit more anxious. They're all signs of they can come with physical fatigue, but when you combine physical fatigue with that emotional side of things, that's when it becomes a lot more noticeable. And it's something that I really push with people that I work at, and something that I try to become aware of myself, is that like if there's little things that are starting to piss you off, you have to start to become aware of why that's happening. And then you can say, okay, well, maybe it's because you could come back to the foundations and you could say my diet is poor or my hydration's been off. I've been eating bad food over the weekend, or you can look at it that way. But then you can also look at it as in, is there something that I'm not dealing with? Do I need to think about that? Do I need to take a little more time to myself where I just pull back from all the social activities and I just go for a walk by myself? Or another one, a nice one would be like, do I need to go and take a sauna or jump in the sea or go for an ice bath? Journaling, playing music, doing art. There's all these other aspects to it. And I think if people start to become aware that these things can have a huge effect on your physical health, then you'll start to become more likely to lean into them. And that's something that I try to push. And one of the really simple ones that I've done with people, especially when you're looking at back pain specifically, is that I've said to them, okay, right, some of the triggers are related to both psychological and emotional fatigue. So you need an emotional kind of outburst. So you need to offload that emotional energy. And for some people, it's crying. Like crying is like a really good way of offloading emotional energy. Now, it's obviously something that you don't want to get stuck in because it can become a bit of a crutch as well. And you can feel like you're losing a lot of control, but it's definitely a really important thing that I think a lot of people overlook. And it's really, really helpful for people who are trying to get over an issue. But another one is dancing. Honestly, man, getting someone I've said this to so many people, and I do it myself, but I just do it unbeknownst to myself when I have headphones in. If there's someone on the verge of like a flare up or on the verge of things going against them, just say, put on a song, your favorite song for 3 to 4 minutes, and just dance to yourself and see how you feel afterwards. And it's a really, really good way of offloading that emotional, offloading that psychological, but then you're also getting a physical aspect to it. That's a huge one that I've noticed that works with people and that works for myself. Dancing, going for walks, going for a sauna, getting in the sea, trying to get out in nature, all the basic ones. But I think you have to become aware of what's your main driver of fatigue right now. And when you start to become aware of that, what's taking the energy from the nervous system, it becomes a lot easier to deal with that. Does that make sense?
Totally. Can I recommend 400 milligrams of caffeine and a 200 kilo deadlift when you're feeling emotional? But I mean, jokes aside, like the points you made there are good points, and everyone is going to be slightly different, and that's actually something. So you also mentioned that, people are maybe not feeling good because they are not eating well, they're not sleeping well, they're not hydrating. But also, what I see a lot of with the clients that I work with is it's also the inverse is also true, where the reason that they're not eating well, the reason that they're not sleeping well is because they're feeling down about themselves or they're struggling with something emotionally. And then the way that they react is they comfort eat or they binge watch TV or they scroll social media and they comfort themselves with cheap dopamine and they don't actually address the root problem. So a lot of the time, that emotional aspect is what they need help with. No one needs a fucking meal plan. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to curse.
No, word, curse
But
away, man.
Okay,
the fifth
brilliant.
time on it, I'll let you away with it.
Brilliant. Nobody needs a fucking meal plan. Like whoever is listening to this, you do not need a meal plan. No one on this planet needs a meal plan. We all know the foods that we should eat. Like the reason you're not eating the foods, and I know this may not be as relevant for the people on your podcast as would be on mine, but the reason you're eating the foods that you're eating is not because you don't know. Everybody knows what a healthy diet looks like. Everybody has a fair idea. You don't have to be a nutritionist to know that some things are going to be better for you and some things are going to be worse. But the reason that people eat in certain patterns is because of emotion and bad habits and stuff like this. So again, if you can address the emotion or like the things that you mentioned, and they're actually all things I use myself, just when you put me on the spot and asked me for my ways of sharpening the saw, I didn't kind of fully think about everything, but I love sea swimming. I love saunaing. I love journaling. I love pretty much all of those things. I don't dance. I'm going to be honest. I'm a horrendous dancer. After 10 drinks, I'll dance all night for you. But up until drink 9.5, you won't see me shuffling too much. But like everyone is different. And like for me, if I'm in a bad emotional state, if I'm pissed off about something, or if I'm frustrated, or if I'm angry, or if I've had a falling out with somebody over something, I go and train. Like that's my way out of it. Train super hard, go and demolish myself in the gym. And I love that so much. But for someone who's already struggling to go to the gym, that mightn't be a realistic thing for them to do when they're not feeling good. So it might be dancing, it might be sauna, it might be whatever these things are. But I think you definitely need to look at yourself as more than just, am I well rested? Because you also need to look at like, am I in a good headspace? And I think all of those things, they all feed into each other. Like, I don't know if it's kind of like a chicken and an egg scenario, right? If you're
Yes,
not
yes.
sleeping well, you're not eating well, no wonder you feel like shit.
Yeah.
But again, if you're not sleeping well and you're not eating well, maybe it's because you feel like shit. So you kind of have to like work on all of those areas and work on, okay, why am I not feeling good? What do I need to do to change that? How can I feel better about myself? And the simple answer for almost everyone is you can feel better by yourself or better about yourself by just making decisions that are good for your health. Like if you make decisions that are good for your health, very few people that is going to make them feel anything other than better about themselves.
Yeah.
It's like self-confidence, self-belief, self-esteem come from how you treat yourself. It's
Yeah.
and it sounds so basic, but it's like if I just looked at every single decision I made through the lens of what would be the decision here that's good for me, good for my health, good for my mental well-being, the answer to almost everything is there, but it's not easy to do that. And it's not
Yeah.
people don't even realize they're being emotional. Sometimes I'm talking to clients and they have no idea why they're doing what they're doing. And I have to ask them, have an in-depth conversation. And, we go down the rabbit hole and all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, it's this. I never thought about that. And it's like this simple thing that, well, if we just fix that, maybe you won't need to act in certain ways.
Yeah. I would go straight to that. The point that you made there, first off about sharpening saw, everyone has their own way of doing it. And the interesting paradox of, I love the fact that you brought that up. And I think this really makes this kind of bounces back on it. Everyone has their own way of doing it. But you need to make the right decisions. I would add to that, you need to make the right decisions and you also need to give it time. Like, I think people don't understand that. You need to make the right decisions, but over a course of a couple of months to a couple of years at a time. It's not just, okay, what can I do right now to fix everything right now? Because then that becomes a problem. Because when that first thing doesn't work, you look for the next thing. And if that doesn't work, you look for the next thing. And then time works by itself anyway. So the most recent thing that you did, you're going to say, that's the reason. It's the reason that things are working well for me now is because I don't know, I was staying up late, or I went to bed at 1 o'clock and I didn't wake up till 12 o'clock in the day. That's the reason that everything cleared up, is because I had that extra sleep. And even though you've slept poorly all the nights before it, it's the little decisions when made correctly over time that make the biggest difference. And you have to give time. You have to take time into account. The reason I say that is because the reason I give the sleep example, which is I would go back on myself and say that was a poor example. A much easier example to think about is when someone's dealing with an issue or an injury and they'll go to loads of different physios and then they'll go to, let's just say, not to knock anyone, but let's just say they go to a chiropractor and the chiropractor does an adjustment on their back, like they get a back crack and they audibly hear the back crack. But because it's been a couple of weeks before the back pain has subsided, when they leave that, they heard the back crack and they say, okay, well, I was out of place and I'm after getting put back into place. And then it's going to take a little bit of time. So then they start working on it the next couple of days and things start to improve. And then they'll say, oh, it's the chiropractor. They relocated my hips, which is one that I often hear, which doesn't happen. So if anyone thinks it happens, you can't relocate your hips. But anyway.
Where did you relocate them? To your shoulders?
My hips are off.
Last I checked, your hips are always in the same place. I mean, I've worked with 600 clients and I've never seen somebody relocate a hip. They've always been in the place where hips should be.
But it's, oh man, you'd be surprised. So, but what they'll do is you'll attribute it to the last thing that you did. But if you just make the right decisions and you say, tomorrow I want to be 1% better. Okay, well then you just tomorrow you make the same decisions and okay, so that's going to compound. And if you look at that consistently over time, that's how things start to work out for you. And that's how you feel good. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have bad days. You're going to have bad days. Like everyone's going to have ups and downs and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to fall off the wagon. But that's not a problem when you know in your head and in the back of your mind that you're consistently making the right decisions in the right direction. I think that's something that we need to really realize because in this society or the way we live now, everyone just wants everything right now. But when you add time to it, it's so nice. And just before I let you jump in there really quickly, because I wanted to also mention a topic. You said earlier on that going to the gym and blasting out things is a great emotional reset for you. The reason that that's a paradox is that a lot of the people that I deal with are runners and their main way of offloading emotional issue is running. But oftentimes they get injured running, so they need other avenues. So they can't continue running to do that. So they need to look at other ways. So it's a funny paradox. And I just wanted to bring that up, that it's so funny that you have to look at, especially when you're coaching and you say you're kind of, it's all, because it is, a lot of it's about like trial and error, working on different things, trying different things for yourself, and how everyone has their own way of doing things. And you do sometimes just need a bit of like a redirection is what I was getting at.
Totally. Yeah. And you're right. And like, unfortunately, running is, if you do a lot of running, like I think it's fair to say, I don't know the stats, but I think it's fair to say more people probably pick up injuries running than they do in the gym, just because
Yes.
it's more impactful, and a lot of people are running hard roads and maybe without correct footwear and maybe without correct rehabilitation training and whatever else.
I would
It's
say
not
load management if I was picking
load
one.
management. Yeah, my next sentence was, this is more your expertise than mine. But like, I think as well, that's why it is individual, because again, like maybe the runner is feeling down and emotionally wrecked because they can't run. So
Yes.
running is then not, you can't just keep physical stress in the body on top of emotional stress, doing the thing that they're upset about and then getting further injured. So then it drags on. So I think that, like, that's an important kind of distinction to make. But I also think, time and patience, and this is particularly relevant because I know that I think we're going to talk about this. This time of year, it's going into the new year. People are going to set goals. Man, so many people set goals. Like 95% of people who set goals don't achieve them. And yet they do the same thing every year. And they kind of don't maybe look at the steps in between from when they actually set it to what they need to do to actually move from point A to point B, versus just, writing it down is obviously like the most important. It's the most important first step. But then you have to be like, okay, cool. Well, now I need to do all this work and then compound it with time, like you mentioned. And it's not just writing it down. Unfortunately, it's not just writing it down. Like, that is an important component, but you actually need to put in the work and you need to map out that. I don't know if you want to touch on anything on that, or if you want to run through, because I know we were going to speak about some goal setting
No,
frameworks or exercises or things that may be helpful to people coming into the new year. Because I do feel like the way that most people set goals is just wrong. They know how to set goals, but they don't know how to hit goals.
yeah, let's dive into that, man, because that's something that I wanted to go through. Because in fairness, you're excellent at putting goals out there or setting goals and then taking them off and making sure to review them. So let's dive into that. What systems work for you? Maybe systems is the wrong word, but what habits work for you?
For sure, yeah. I actually have a system, but it's more so the components of the system versus one system. Like, it's the same way, nutrition or training. Like, most systems will work if you do the system properly and you follow it through. Like, there's lots of ways that you can become better at a certain attribute. Like, I'm sure there's multiple different programs that you could design that would bring a person to the same outcome, but
Yeah.
you could probably get them there in like 4 or 5 different ways, so long as they actually follow the program, right? That's the
Yeah.
tricky bit. It's kind of like, people are like, what's the best training split? It's like, well, dude, how long have you been doing your last training split? It's like, oh, well, I change it up every few weeks. It's like, yeah, well, it doesn't matter what training split I get you. You're still going to just be going through the motions. So I think the most important thing is having something that you can follow. And in terms of system or the components within any system, so the system I use is the goal pyramid system, which I've probably shared maybe on this podcast before. I've definitely shared on my social media a lot, but it's essentially a pyramid. And at the top of the pyramid, you have the main goal that you're focusing on. And if that's a 3-year goal, the next rung of the pyramid is the 2 major goals you need to achieve, and then the 3 major goals you need to achieve to get to those. And it's essentially finding your end goal and breaking it down. Now, there's lots of ways that you can do that. Essentially, what you're doing is you're deciding on the end goal, and then you're working backwards, and you're putting in place action steps so that people can actually achieve the goal that they want to achieve. Because if you just write something down and you don't know how you're going to get to it, it's hard for you to see yourself making progress towards it. So, very simply, if you wanted to achieve something certain, I'm going to give my own example here because it's so clear in my mind. But one of my goals is to wingsuit base jump, and there's a lot of work involved in that. So, like, I set out my goal pyramid like 3 years ago, and it was like a 5-year pyramid. And this, at the top was wingsuit base jump. And then below that was lots of smaller goals. So on the next rung was complete base jumping course, was complete 200 wingsuit skydives, was buy skydiving rig, was buy base jumping rig, was complete a canopy course, was buy equipment, was, complete certain course. And it's kind of like this big goal. But then I broke down all the steps I would need to get to that goal. Like, what's the actual trainings I would need? What's the actual knowledge I would need to acquire? What's the events I would need to attend? How many jumps do I need to do? And I just basically did the maths. This is 10. How do I get to 10? What are the 10 steps that I need to take to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? And that's just essentially a way of getting there. So it's setting the goal. It's then setting out the action steps that you need to do to take to get to the goal. And then it's actually reviewing them. So goal setting is just the first step. Then you need to build the plan, and then you need to review the plan. So for example, my 5-year plan turned into a 6-year plan because I was running a year behind. And people are going to be like, a year? That's great. These numbers will seem so big. But the reality is the time is going to pass anyway.
Yeah.
And time, this year, 2023, absolutely flew. And this year, I hope to do 150 skydives. I actually did 60. Oh, so I'm way off the mark on what I expected to do this year.
Just getting back into it. It cut off there for a second. So sorry, Eoin, jump right back into it.
Yeah, man. So just on the point of having to revisit and readjust sometimes. So this year I fell way behind what I had intended to do in terms of number of skydives, which would have got me to my goal by the end of 2024. So, instead of being like, I've messed it up, I'm never going to get there, which is what people do all the time and start again, I just went back and I readjusted it and I moved everything out by a year. I kind of assumed I'm going to need another year to get where I want to go. And I'm going to just have to adjust things. So, I think it's important as well, people need to actually decide on a few goals that they want to achieve. People just write out random shit. But you actually have to decide on something that is actually important to you for the next 4 or 5 years. So I generally don't ever have more than 3 to 5 big goals, big life goals that I'm working on at any point. And if you're already struggling to hit goals, I consider myself pretty proficient at setting goals and hitting goals. If you're already struggling with that, you should not be setting 5 goals. You should be setting 1 to 3 max and getting really clear on what the steps are that you need to do. And break it down. If your goal is a year long, you need to know what you have to achieve by January, February, March. You need to know how you're going to check in, because otherwise you get to June and you're like, well, am I on track? And if you don't know what the steps are, well, then you've no idea if you're on track and you're going to just end the year, not achieving your goal and going, I'll just set another goal. And that's what happens every single year. People just set a new goal every year and then don't hit it. And it's they never revisit it. They never map out the steps. They never look at well, why have I not achieved that goal? Whereas if they just focused on one goal and if they didn't achieve it in the year, if they saw it through for the next year, they'd get there. And then they'd be like, okay, so, sometimes I actually don't get to my goals in the time frame that I think, and I have to wait a little bit longer or I have to change the plan. What's that phrase? No, even the best plan or no plan survives contact with the enemy, or the best plan doesn't survive contact with the enemy. It's you can make a plan, but you don't know what's going to happen in life. So you need to be able to adjust. And that's kind of the third part.
It's it's something that I need to, I think, focus on a bit more myself. I like the idea of the pyramid where you kind of set the main one and you set the steps to it. And as you said, once you fall, because you will, there's no question, there's going to be times along that point that you're not going to hit the exact goal that you wanted to get to. And it's the same with anything in the gym, in a run, in any context, it's going to be the same thing. It's your reaction to that then is the most important thing. Do you stop everything, or are you able to just reorganize and take a couple of minutes to make another plan? There's nothing wrong with feeling overwhelmed, especially. I think that's another big one. Is when you start to, if you don't hit a goal, you start to feel overwhelmed that, okay, well, I'm not where I want to be right now. And I feel like everything is going against me. But that feeling does pass. It does pass. You just need to give it it kind of comes back to that idea of just start putting things in motion. I often like to use the thing, especially when people struggle with goals, is like the idea of a compass where you know where you're trying to get to. It's not that you need to take this off exactly and have that title. It's more that I'm working towards this specific direction. I find that helps getting people off the ground, people who are struggling with setting goals. Now, once you can start setting goals, it makes it so much easier. But if you have a certain direction that you're working towards, whether it be, I would like to work out 3 times a week, and I'd like to do an event in the weekend, or maybe twice a year, I'd like to do a big event. This is something that I've worked with people a lot more recently. It's like, I want to do 2 big events a year where I build up to, and then I want to have one every couple of months that I do something small. So that could be like, I want to do a marathon in the year and I want to do a half marathon, or I want to climb Kilimanjaro with my family. You know, it could be something simple like that. Well, not simple, but it could be something like you have the idea where you're saying, I'm going to have a couple of events and then I'm going to work towards those. For me, more specifically, obviously, I have to break it down into the idea of like the health, wealth, that whole side of things, and personal and all that, and look at what you want to work on. My main one for this year gone by, I think, was I really wanted to focus on the jiu-jitsu while I was working at the same time on the projects on the back pain course. And that was, in terms of business, that was one of the main ones, was getting the back pain course done. But it also came with a lot of personal development as well, because I think focused on one topic for so long, it really makes you have to think about it in so many different ways, and how to think about, like, well, first off, what do I understand about this topic? What have I seen in this? And then how can I then relay that to other people? And then when you look at how can I relay that to other people, there is another 10 ways of trying to figure out the best way to say it. Do you know what I mean? So I think that when you look at the levels to it, there's so many levels to it. So for me, for the last year, it's more that I've been working on trying to, I guess, work in a specific direction as opposed to having set goals. But in the year ahead, now that I've moved in that direction, I've transitioned to that side, that lifestyle, you could say, and that way of life. Now I need to be a bit clearer on exactly what I need to lay out. So do you have any practice on what becomes more valuable, or what's a higher priority for yourself right now? Do you have a way of looking at that?
Yeah, totally. I can actually share, I don't know if I can share my screen, if this is even going to be on YouTube, but I can share the framework if you want, if you want people to be able to see it, because I actually have a screenshot of it in the background here.
Okay.
But
Yeah, you send it to me anyway. You can share it for a second, but send it to me. Most people will probably be listening to this on Spotify or on iTunes.
What I'll do is I'll share it with you, and if anyone wants it, they can reach out to you and get it off you directly.
Yeah,
that's probably easier. So yeah, basically, I mean, it does come down to priorities. And look, I've had loads of goals that didn't work out, or, things got in the way, or plans changed. And that's okay. You have to be okay with it. Like, my Atlantic row is postponed at the moment. We had planned to row the Atlantic, me and a friend, and we planned it for like a year and a half. We put in so much work, hundreds of hours of work, hundreds of hours of training, working with an Olympic rowing coach, like working with a big charity who I won't name, who basically pulled the plug on us after 18 months of work because they weren't happy with the insurance, and they weren't going to back us after like a year and a half's work, and so much money as well, like thousands and thousands of euro. And that just fell apart. So that was obviously disappointing. And I do intend to do that in the future. But then I found skydiving and I went down that route. And then I just, completely went down that rabbit hole. So sometimes you just don't hit your goals, and sometimes your priorities change. It's like, for me to go and row the Atlantic now, I need to be able to take 3 months off work. It costs somewhere between 50 and 100 grand to do it. For people. And you need to be in a position where you can just dump everything for 3 months, And I am not in a position to be able to do that right now. Full team of clients, 50 odd clients. Whereas skydiving is something I can do on the weekends. I can really pursue that at the moment. So right now the priority is that, because it just makes more sense from what I can do. But it would still be nice. And, that goal is not dead. That goal has just been moved. It has just been pushed down the line. It's still something that I'd like to achieve. But I think, you get to know yourself. And I think a lot of the time people are like, I don't want to set this goal because I'm not sure if it's the right goal.
Yeah.
But a goal is just, as you said, it's a direction. It's in the general direction of where you want to go with your life. And working towards a goal, all the value is not the goal. The value is the journey. It's the things that you learn, the skills, the people you meet, the character traits that you develop. The value is in the journey. The value is not in the goal. So it doesn't matter if the goalpost changes. And it probably will along the way. You see so many people, they get into fitness and they first do a photo shoot. And then a couple of years later, they decide to get into strength, powerlifting or something. And then a few years later, they're like, I'm a little bit older and beating up my joints. I'm going to start jiu-jitsu. And it's not like they failed at their powerlifting goal or their body composition goal. They've just changed what they want to achieve. But if you don't have some direction that you're moving in, well, then you're going to just be stuck where you are, because the whole thing of setting a goal and working towards a goal is you find out who you are, like you understand yourself on the way to that goal. And then you start to understand, well, if it is the wrong goal, fuck it. Okay, we'll change it. And like,
But
if it's the right goal,
where's the balance then? Where's it? Because I have friends who have such a habit of working on something for a whole of 3 weeks and then changing, and then working on something new for a whole of 3 weeks and then 2 weeks and then 1 week, and then never achieving anything. So where's the balance of actually working towards and achieving something and then changing the goal, or knowing when it's the right time to change?
Well, I personally think if you haven't put 6 months into something, that you're just codding yourself.
Yeah.
Like show me anything worth having that you can get in less than 6 months.
Juggling.
I mean, but I mean, how many things, can you really, of course, yeah, you can do a photo shoot and you can have an amazing fitness transformation in 6 months, but like nobody is achieving jack shit in anything in 3 weeks.
Yeah. So yes. Well, big change. It can sit like big change. You're dead right. I think you're 100% in saying 6 months, because there's a certain stage as well that it's like, what's the stages of skill acquisition, where at the start, when you're a beginner, you're like, geez, I don't know this at all. And then as you get to know it, you're like, oh, I actually really know this. And then the more levels that you go through it, the more of an expert you become in it, you realize there's a lot of things that you don't understand on it. And I think the 6 month mark is a nice one, because you've kind of broken the first stage and the second stage, that you've kind of gotten past the point that you think, okay, I'm actually really, really good at this. And then you can see that there's more to it, that, well, if I continue to lean into this, there's so much more to learn. There's so much more to refine. Obviously, that's a very general way of speaking about it, but I think the idea of 6 months is a perfect time frame for someone to continue to work on something and then say, I'll decide. But you actually have to work on it for 6 months. You can't work on it for 3 weeks and then say, at the end of 6 months, I will decide, and then stop working on it for 5 months and say, well, I give it 6 months.
Yeah, man. This is the thing. 6 months, you're not even good at something after 6 months.
Yeah.
Like after 6 months, you've built enough momentum to be good. Like 6 months is like the runway. Imagine anything you want to achieve as an airplane taking off. If you don't do 6 months, you don't even get off the runway.
Yeah.
Like you don't even give it a chance. So these people who come in and out, and in my world, it's they want to do a 12-week plan and then they want to go and stop gymming. It's like, and this is absolutely ludicrous to me. I can't understand it. I'm like, you understand that everyone around you who is fit and healthy and has what you want, you see them and they go to the gym every week. You don't have to be in there every day. Maybe you go 2 or 3 times a week, but like, you got to go. You can't just get, everyone wants the result. No one wants to work. They want the character trait, but they don't want to go through the struggle that is required to create the character trait. And like, I think it's very, very true. Like I genuinely think, I don't even think a year, to be honest, is enough it's not enough to give yourself the best chance of success. Like,
yeah,
there's
sure.
another really nice quote from someone in the entrepreneurial space, and it's like, most people overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate what they can achieve in a decade. Yeah. And like Alex Hormozy, probably mentioned him, right? Don't I?
Man.
But he's like, if you just do something consistently for 10 years, it is unreasonable that you would not be incredibly good at it. Like, it's just that time thing. Like, no matter how bad you are at something, if you do it for 10 years, you're going to be good at it. You can't possibly not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think time and focus, and actually, again, it comes back to, well, why are people jumping ship every 3 weeks? Maybe they're emotionally not ready to put themselves out there. Maybe they have a fear of failure. Maybe it's a fear of rejection. There's something emotional that's There's something that's causing them to jump ship every few weeks, as opposed to, and I'm all for trying new things. Like I've had multiple failed businesses and multiple things that didn't work out. 100%, like go for it. But if you're not giving stuff 6 months,
Yeah.
you're only cutting yourself.
I
Like
think on
it's
that point as well, of like why do people quit after 3 weeks? I think a lot of us as well are inclined to, when the barrier comes up, to, instead of kind of embracing it and trying to work with it, or the obstacle is the way, in a lot of ways, is I
I
can't
love
think of
that.
who was that, Ryan Holiday, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant book. One of my
What
favorite books.
It's excellent. It's excellent. Where he's like, you need to work through it basically, and a lot of times you can learn so much from it. That's obviously a very shortened way of talking about it. But I think for me, jiu-jitsu is one of the best ways of consistently getting reminded of that principle, because you go so well for 6 to 8 to 10 weeks, then you have 1 week that nothing goes right, like everything goes wrong, and honestly, you feel like, well, I probably won't go back there. I'm actually going to quit that because I don't enjoy that anymore. That was really, but like I'm after doing 9 classes there, and every one of them are going wrong for me. Like I wasn't enjoying any bit of that. And then all you have to do, you let that happen, you let those emotions come over, but then you just say, okay, well, Monday I'm going to go again, and
Mm.
Wednesday I'm just going to go again. We'll see how it goes, and you ride that wave. And when consistently, and I said this to a friend recently who started jiu-jitsu, I said, when this happens, when you ride that wave, and when you come out the other end of it, you are going to be so much better at it, specifically at the sport. But the confidence that gives you is hilarious, because it's like, Jesus, you notice then that there was all it was an obstacle. All it was a momentum shift, and you needed to work into it, and we needed to work through it. But I think in a lot of ways, when you go back, why do people quit after 3 weeks, 6 weeks? They don't ride that wave out enough. They just let it take over them for a couple of days, and then they drop everything because they feel it's not given back to them. But that's one from mine. That's a perspective I look at. I know you have to go, so I don't want to hold you for too much longer. Is there anything that you'd add to that, or anything that you would add to it before we finish up?
I think the single most important thing that you can do is to get around people who are on the same page as you. Like I told a story, actually, I didn't post it yet. It's going to be on my Instagram this evening. There's a friend of mine who started a business recently. He actually started a business at the beginning of the year, and we've been chatting a good bit over and back. And last week he reached out to me, and we had a conversation 4 months ago regarding him posting content. And he was like, I'm not sure what the boys will laugh at me, and I don't know how I'll be perceived, and I'm not good at talking to the camera, and all these fears, right? We've all had them. We both talk on camera. We know that it's not easy that first time.
Mm.
And, 4 months ago, we had this conversation, and I gave him advice. I told him what to do, whatever else. And last week on Tuesday, he texted me and he said, look, I'm struggling here. I know I need to start posting content, but I'm struggling, and I'm trying to find my authentic voice and all of this stuff. And I turned around and I was like, bro, bullshit. Bull fucking shit. I was like, you're a good guy. I want to see you succeed. So I'm not going to hold your hand, and I'm not going to be your friend. I'm going to be someone who actually pushes you a little bit. I was like, you're not looking for your authentic voice. You're scared of what your mates will say. You're scared of being seen as a failure. You're scared of other people's opinions. And he said, yeah. He said, you're right, you're right. And I said, I know I'm right because I've been there. So I get it. And I wrote him out the exact way to start talking on stories, with the Instagram questions where people will post in questions. It's a very easy way to answer some questions and get talking in your stories. And then I gave him it's a script that I have for if I want my clients to give me some feedback. I kind of give them a loose outline of this is how you set up to take a video. This is, what you say. This is, obviously I don't tell them exactly what to say, but I give them a general outline of,
Yeah.
this is just some ideas, like what were the things you struggled with? What did the coaching benefit you with? Would you recommend? Just a few kind of basic questions. So I basically gave him that structure and was like, look, dude, just turn these things to yourself. But most importantly, I gave him accountability, because I gave him all that. I went out of my way. I spent 15 or 20 minutes sending him over stuff and giving him voice notes and explaining exactly what he needed to do. And then I followed up with a voice note, and I was like, if I don't see a video on your feed by Friday. I will never fucking help you with anything again. And I was like, do not contact me for help. Do not ask me for help, because you just need to start posting videos. And everyone else is, and he was about to fork out a couple of €1,000 on a mentor. I was like, dude, you don't need a mentor. I was like, if you pay a couple of €1,000 to a mentor, he's going to shout at you, like, maybe not shout at you, but he's going to tell you need to post. And because you're financially invested, you're going to post. I'm like, I'm going to save you a couple of €1,000 and just tell you to fucking post. And so I basically gave him accountability. And that was on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, the video was out after months and months and months. So the following day, about 16 hours later, he had 4 or 5 videos of him up on his page talking. And I've seen he's been posting content since. So it's like, if you're in an environment where you're worried about people laughing at you, or you're in an environment where people are not taking risks and taking chances, like we're talking about someone who fails after 3 weeks and gives up when they meet the first barrier. Would they meet, if they were in this call with us now and it was week 3, would they have any issues going in and facing week 4? If this was a private call between me, you, and this person who struggled for 3 weeks, they would leave the call fucking fired up, ready to attack week 4. They would be like, oh, you guys have faced failure as well. Oh, it's just normal. It's part of the process. But if they don't have that around them, then, all they have to worry about is, oh, I don't want to be seen to fail. What if it doesn't work out? So I think getting yourself around like-minded people
makes a difference.
It doesn't mean ditch all your friends, like I'm not being extreme, like, ditch all your friends who don't think like you, because lots of my friends don't think, well, maybe not lots, but some of my friends don't think like me. But the more people you have that are doing the same things that you are doing, and the more people who are also struggling, because let's be real, if you're setting a goal, the very fact that you're setting a goal means it's something difficult. And the fact that it's difficult means you're going to struggle. Like if you set a goal, if you want to hit the goal, you're going to have to struggle. It's not going to be easy. Because otherwise, like no one sets a goal to fucking go to Tesco. You know, there's no, like, why would you? No one sets a goal to walk to work tomorrow morning. Like you just do. But if you're setting a big fitness goal or a big challenge, you mentioned, I can't remember what mountain you mentioned, but you mentioned the mountain. Like if you're setting one of those goals, there's a massive challenge and you may fail and you may not get up there. But like you'll 100% fail and 100% not get up there if you don't try. But again, if you want to go up that mountain, you got to have the right people around you. You can't just go on your own. So I think that the last piece of advice that I would have is like to round up all that goal setting stuff. Set your goal. Figure out what the steps are to get to your goal. Revisit your goal once every month or every 3 months or every 6 months, depending on how big and long the goal is, whatever you think is the right amount. But like revisit it frequently and see, are you on track? Do you need to make changes? And then just put yourself in an environment that's going to support you and that's actually going to help you get there versus hold you back.
Yeah. Every one of those, I agree with them all because it's such a solid point. And sometimes people do need that bit of a kick in the arse as well to get going. And the accountability goes a long, long, long way for that. But for everything, thank you again, Eoin, for jumping on, or Dobby, as I do call you, but Eoin for today. Thanks a million for jumping on, man.
Very professional.
Very professional. I appreciate it as always. Always a great episode. Looking forward to doing one in person as well very soon. When we do meet up. But thank you very much. Where can people find you?
Same old IG at Eoin Dobbin Cattle. I'm not even going to try and spell that. If you go into Robbie's followers and put in EOIN, I'll pop up there somewhere. Hopefully I'll be lingering around the top. That's where the top followers hang around, isn't it?
You would expect.
Instagram is the best place. I've an email list, I've the podcast, I've lots of other bits, but everything is pretty much centralized in Instagram. So come and hit me up there and I'll shout at you and tell you to go and do your goals.
Lovely stuff. Perfect. As always, guys, thank you so much for listening in. If anyone has any questions, you can direct them towards myself or Eoin, or if anyone wants to get that sheet that he has for the goal setting, you can either contact him directly or you can get in contact with me and I'll get it off him for him. But thank you again for listening in this week, and I will chat to you all again next week. Have a good one. Okay guys, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're looking to learn more about what we do, as well as check out any of the mobility and rehab programs we have available, just head over to the description of this podcast and you will find a link to all the programs there. As always, thank you for listening, and I will chat to you all again in the next episode. Have a good one.